Imagine discovering your fiancé's mother is secretly his lover and the mother of his child, days before your dream wedding. Sofia Martinez didn't run. She exposed it all during the ring exchange in a packed chapel. How did she pull it off? You won't believe it.
Thanks for having me, Eliza. Sharing this was hard, but I'm glad to show that standing tall against manipulation can set you free. Let's unravel how it all went down. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of St. Maria's Chapel, casting golden rays across the polished wooden pews. I stood in the bridal suite, adjusting my mantilla veil one final time. The Spanish lace had belonged to my grandmother, and wearing it made me feel connected to generations of strong women who had come before me. My black hair was swept into a romantic low bun, and when I caught my reflection in the mirror, my dark brown eyes sparkled with anticipation. Today was supposed to be perfect. After 3 years with Mark, 18 months of engagement, and 8 months of meticulous planning, I was finally going to marry the man I loved. At 27, I felt ready for this next chapter. Mark, who was now 27 as well, we'd bonded over sharing the same birth year during college, was everything I thought I wanted. Successful, charming, and devoted to his family. Maybe too devoted, I sometimes thought, but I pushed those concerns aside. "Sofia, you look absolutely radiant," my maid of honor, Carmen, said as she helped me into my dress. The ivory silk hugged my curves perfectly, and the cathedral train would create a stunning silhouette as I walked down the aisle. "I can't believe this day is finally here," I whispered, touching the delicate beadwork on my bodice. Every detail had been carefully chosen, from the white roses in my bouquet to the string quartet that would play as I made my entrance. This wedding represented everything I dreamed of since growing up in America as the daughter of Spanish immigrants, a celebration of love, family, and the bright future I was building with Mark. My parents had worked double shifts at our family restaurant for months to fund this $30,000 celebration, their sacrifice making every detail even more precious. But even in that moment of joy, a shadow lingered. Mark's mother, Eleanor Whitmore, had made the past 3 years challenging in ways I'd never expected. She was a woman who commanded attention wherever she went, with her platinum blonde hair always perfectly styled and her designer clothes that screamed old money. At 51, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. From our first meeting, Eleanor had made it clear that I wasn't what she'd envisioned for her precious son. The comments started small, observations about my exotic heritage, questions about whether I truly understood Mark's background and expectations. As a proud Spanish-American woman whose family had built a successful restaurant business from nothing after immigrating to this country, I knew exactly what she meant. "Remember, dear," Eleanor had said during one particularly memorable dinner 6 months ago, "the Whitmore name carries certain responsibilities. Mark will need a wife who understands the importance of maintaining our family's reputation." I'd bitten my tongue then, as I had countless times before. Mark always defended his mother with the same refrain: "She's just protective. Once she gets to know you better, she'll come around." But Eleanor never came around. Anything, her hostility intensified as our wedding date approached. She questioned every decision I made, from the choice of venue, a bit too colorful, don't you think? To the menu, perhaps something more traditional would be appropriate. When I insisted on incorporating elements of my heritage into the ceremony, she'd sighed dramatically and muttered about complications. The breaking point should have come 3 weeks before the wedding, during what was supposed to be a peaceful final dress fitting. Eleanor had accompanied me, ostensibly to help, but I knew she was there to assert control one last time. "You know, Sofia," she'd said as the seamstress pinned my hem, "I've been thinking about your future with Mark. He's always been impressionable when it comes to pretty faces. But eventually, men like him realize they need someone from their own world." The seamstress had frozen, pins still in her mouth, clearly uncomfortable with the tension in the room. "What exactly are you trying to say, Eleanor?" I'd asked, my voice carefully controlled. "I'm saying that passion fades, dear. What matters is compatibility, shared values, breeding. Your Spanish blood will never truly fit into our world. It's why Mark will always choose what's familiar, what's real." The racial undertone hit me like a slap, but I'd smiled politely and changed the subject, telling myself that after the wedding, things would be different. We'd establish boundaries, create our own family traditions, and Eleanor's influence would naturally diminish. How naive I was. 3 nights before the wedding, everything changed. Mark had been acting strangely for weeks, taking phone calls in private, becoming defensive when I asked simple questions about wedding logistics, and spending an unusual amount of time at his mother's house, helping with last-minute preparations. That Thursday evening, he was in the shower when his phone buzzed on our kitchen counter. His phone was left unlocked, a habit I never questioned until now. The screen lit up with a text notification from Mom, and the preview made my blood run cold. "She'll never make you happy like I can. Think about Maya, she needs her father." Maya? I'd never heard Mark mention anyone named Maya. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. I knew I shouldn't look, knew it was a violation of his privacy, but something primal and desperate drove me forward. The message thread between Mark and Eleanor wasn't what I expected. These weren't the typical exchanges between a mother and son. The tone was intimate, possessive, almost romantic. I scrolled up with growing horror, reading messages that painted a picture I couldn't comprehend. "Eleanor, I miss you. When you're with her, I feel like I'm losing you all over again." "Mark, you know this is complicated. The wedding is in 3 days." "Eleanor, cancel it. You don't owe her anything. Think about what we have, what we've always had." My vision blurred as I continued reading. There were references to secret meetings, to a shared past that went far beyond a normal mother-son relationship. And then I saw it, a saved voicemail from 2 weeks earlier. My finger hovered over the play button, my heart hammering so hard I was sure Mark would hear it over the running water. I pressed play. Eleanor's voice filled our kitchen, but it wasn't the cold, controlled tone I knew. This was raw, desperate pleading. "Mark, baby, you can't do this. You can't marry that. That horny little mistake. She doesn't deserve a wedding. She doesn't deserve you. What about us? What about our little girl? Maya is 4 years old, Mark. She looks just like you with those same green eyes and that stubborn chin. I've kept our secret for so long, protected what we have. Please, leave her. Come home to me. Come home to your real family." The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the tile floor. The shower was still running. Mark was humming, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire world, our entire world, had just imploded. Maya, a 4-year-old daughter. Eleanor's daughter. Mark's daughter. The mathematical impossibility of it hit me like a physical blow. If Maya was 4, she would have been conceived when Mark was 23 and Eleanor was 47, when Mark and I had already been dating for 6 months. I managed to compose myself before Mark emerged from the bathroom, but inside, I was a different person. The trusting, hopeful bride-to-be had died in that kitchen, replaced by someone harder, colder, and infinitely more determined. Over the next 2 days, I moved through the final wedding preparations like an actress playing a role. I smiled at the rehearsal dinner, graciously accepted congratulations from family and friends, and played the part of the blushing bride perfectly. But every moment was calculated, every interaction a performance designed to maintain the illusion until I was ready to shatter it completely. Eleanor, meanwhile, seemed to be savoring her perceived victory. At the rehearsal dinner, she'd cornered me by the dessert table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You know, Sofia, I've been thinking about what kind of grandmother I'll be," she'd said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Of course, that assumes Mark will want children with you. He's always been very particular about bloodlines." The irony was so thick I nearly choked on it, but I simply smiled and nodded, already planning her downfall. I spent Friday night researching, preparing, and strategizing. I downloaded the voicemail and transferred it to a small, powerful Bluetooth speaker that I'd hidden among the white roses in my bouquet. The florist, thinking it was for a special musical surprise, had enthusiastically helped me conceal the device within the lush greenery. I also prepared a backup plan. I'd printed a photo of Maya from Eleanor's social media account, where she'd posted pictures of my precious goddaughter without ever mentioning the child's parentage. The resemblance to Mark was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, with the kind of perfect weather that made people believe in fairy tales. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the familiar comfort of my parents' house, and for a moment I almost forgot what I'd learned. Almost. My mother knocked softly on the door. "Mija, it's time to start getting ready. Your hair and makeup team will be here in an hour." As I sat in the chair, watching the stylist work my hair into the romantic low bun I'd practiced a dozen times, I thought about my grandmother. Abuela had been a force of nature, a woman who'd immigrated to America with nothing but determination and had built a life through sheer will. She would have understood what I was about to do. She would have approved. The mantilla veil was the final touch, the delicate Spanish lace cascading over my shoulders like a waterfall of history and strength. This family heirloom, passed down through 3 generations of strong women who'd made their mark in America, now felt like armor preparing me for battle. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not just a bride, but a warrior prepared for battle. Carmen and my other bridesmaids fluttered around me, adjusting my train and touching up my makeup. They were so excited, so happy for me, and I felt a pang of guilt for what was coming. But they deserved to know the truth too. Everyone did. "You're glowing," Carmen said, squeezing my hand. "Mark is the luckiest man alive." If only she knew, the limousine ride to the church was surreal. My father sat beside me, his eyes misty with pride and emotion. He'd worked those double shifts at the restaurant, had saved every penny to give his daughter the celebration she deserved. The guilt was almost overwhelming, but I reminded myself that the blame belonged to Mark and Eleanor, not to me. At the church, the bridal suite was a flurry of activity. Flowers were being arranged, photographers were capturing candid moments, and everyone was caught up in the excitement of the day. With 200 guests from both families, the chapel felt like a pressure cooker of expectations and social obligations. I went through the motions mechanically, my mind focused on what was coming. That's when Eleanor made her entrance. She swept into the room like a queen surveying her domain, resplendent in a navy blue mother-of-the-groom dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her platinum hair was styled in an elegant chignon, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like the picture of respectability, the perfect society matron. "Sofia, dear," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of condescension, "you look adequate. I suppose the dress will have to do." The bridesmaids exchanged uncomfortable glances, but I simply smiled. "Thank you, Eleanor, you look lovely as well." She circled me like a predator, making small adjustments to my veil and train under the guise of being helpful, but I could feel the malice radiating from her, the barely contained triumph. "I've been thinking about your future," she said quietly, so only I could hear. "About what kind of life you'll really have with Mark. You know, men of his caliber often need variety. I do hope you won't take it personally when he seeks companionship elsewhere." I met her eyes in the mirror, my expression serene. "Oh, Eleanor, I think you'll find that Mark's taste in companionship is far more predictable than you might imagine." Something flickered across her face, confusion, perhaps even a hint of concern. But before she could respond, the wedding coordinator appeared to announce that it was time for the ceremony to begin. As we prepared to leave for the chapel, Eleanor pulled me aside one final time. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the final insult that would justify everything I was about to do. She leaned in close, her expensive perfume cloying and overwhelming. Her lips nearly brushed my ear as she whispered, "Enjoy my son's dick while you can, you little whore. You're just a phase. He always comes back to what's real, what matters. You're nothing but a horny little mistake who doesn't deserve a wedding." The venom in her voice was startling, the mask finally slipping completely. This was the real Eleanor Whitmore, not the society matron or the concerned mother, but a jealous, possessive woman who saw me as a threat to something she considered hers. I pulled back and looked directly into her eyes, my smile never wavering. "Thank you for that, Eleanor. It means more than you know." She looked puzzled by my response, but there was no time for further conversation. The music was starting, and it was time for the show to begin. My hand instinctively moved to my bouquet, feeling the hidden speaker nestled among the roses. Soon, very soon, Eleanor's own words would echo through this sacred space, but they wouldn't be whispered in my ear. They'd be broadcast for everyone to hear. The chapel was stunning. Hundreds of white roses lined the aisle, and the afternoon sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the stone floor. 200 guests had gathered to witness what they believed would be the union of Mark Whitmore and Sofia Martinez. Family, friends, colleagues, and members of Eleanor's precious social circle. As I stood at the back of the chapel, my arm linked through my father's, I felt a moment of genuine sadness for what might have been. Under different circumstances, this could have been the happiest day of my life. Mark looked handsome in his tuxedo, standing at the altar with his groomsmen. He was smiling, confident, completely unaware that his world was about to implode. Eleanor sat in the front row, resplendent in her navy dress, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. She thought she'd won. She thought her cruel words had broken me, that I would go through with this wedding as a defeated, humiliated woman who would eventually be discarded when Mark tired of me. She had no idea what was coming. The processional music began, Pachelbel's canon in D, just as I'd dreamed. My bridesmaids walked down the aisle in their soft pink dresses, followed by Carmen as my maid of honor. Each step brought me closer to the moment of truth. Then it was my turn. The familiar notes of "Here Comes the Bride" filled the chapel, and every head turned toward me. I felt the collective intake of breath as the guests saw me in my full bridal glory, the ivory silk dress, the cathedral train, the mantilla veil that spoke to my heritage and my strength. My father walked me down the aisle with measured steps, and I could feel his pride radiating beside me. When we reached the altar, he lifted my veil and kissed my cheek, whispering, "I love you, Mija, be happy." If only he knew what happiness would actually require. Mark took my hands, his green eyes bright with what I'd once thought was love but now recognized as something far more complicated. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "Thank you," I replied, my voice steady. "I have a feeling this will be a wedding everyone remembers." Father Rodriguez began the ceremony with the traditional words about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here we were, in a house of God, about to expose the most unholy deception imaginable. We exchanged vows, and I spoke the words of love and fidelity even as they turned to ash in my mouth. The weight of tradition felt heavy around me, the mantilla veil that had blessed 3 generations of marriages, the rings that were supposed to symbolize eternal commitment, the sacred space where my parents had dreamed of seeing their daughter find happiness. Then came the ring exchange. Mark slipped the wedding band onto my finger, its weight feeling like a shackle rather than a symbol of eternal love. I had envisioned this moment as the pinnacle of romantic commitment, but instead it felt like the final piece of an elaborate lie clicking into place. As I took Mark's ring in my trembling hands, I felt the eyes of 200 guests upon us, their collective breath held in anticipation of this sacred moment. "With this ring," I began, my voice clear and steady, "I thee." I paused, the weight of what I was about to do settling over me like a mantle. I thought of Maya, an innocent 4-year-old caught in this web of deception. My heart ached for the child involved, and for a moment I hesitated. Was I doing the right thing? Then I looked at Eleanor, her face glowing with triumph, and I remembered her whispered cruelty, her years of psychological torture, her sick manipulation of her own son. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the chapel, "before I give you this ring, I think our guests need to hear something." The collective gasp from the congregation was audible. 200 people suddenly leaning forward, straining to understand what was happening. Mark's face went from confusion to panic in the span of a heartbeat. "Sofia, what are you doing?" he hissed, his grip on my hands tightening. I gently extracted my hands from his and turned to face our guests. Eleanor's face had gone chalk white, her triumphant smile frozen in place like a death mask. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying the trained projection I'd learned in high school theater, "before we continue with this ceremony, I think there's something you all need to hear." I raised my bouquet slightly, the white roses trembling just enough to activate the hidden Bluetooth speaker. With a subtle press of the button concealed among the stems, I transformed our wedding into something else entirely, a courtroom where truth would finally be served. Eleanor's recorded voice filled the sacred space, amplified and grotesquely intimate against the backdrop of stained glass and stone. "Mark, baby, you can't do this. You can't marry that horny little mistake. She doesn't deserve a wedding. She doesn't deserve you." The silence was deafening. Eleanor's face crumpled as she heard her own desperate words echoing through the chapel. Mark stood frozen, his skin turning a ghastly shade of gray. But the recording continued, each word a nail in their carefully constructed coffin. "What about us? What about our little girl? Maya is 4 years old, Mark. She looks just like you, with those same green eyes and that stubborn chin. I've kept our secret for so long, protected what we have." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the congregation. I could see Mark's groomsmen exchanging horrified glances, could hear Eleanor's society friends whispering in shock and disgust. The final blow came with Eleanor's most damning words. "Please, leave her. Come home to me. Come home to your real family." When the recording ended, the silence was more damning than any scream could have been. The weight of revelation hung in the air like incense, thick and choking, but I wasn't finished. I reached into my bouquet and pulled out the printed photograph of Maya, a beautiful little girl with Mark's unmistakable green eyes and stubborn chin. "This is Maya Whitmore," I announced, holding the photo high for all to see. "Eleanor's goddaughter. Notice the family resemblance. I looked at Mark, whose face was a canvas of shame, terror, and disbelief. Then I turned to Eleanor, who was staring at me with pure, undiluted hatred. The mask had finally fallen completely, revealing the monster beneath. For 3 years, I said, my voice steady and clear, I've been told that I wasn't good enough for the Whitmore family, that I didn't understand your values, your breeding, your precious reputation. I calmly removed my engagement ring and wedding band, placing them on the altar beside the unity candle we would never light. What I didn't understand, I continued, was that those values included incest, lies, and the kind of twisted relationship that produces secret children. Eleanor finally found her voice, standing up in the front row with shaking legs. This is a lie, she's making this up. Really? I asked, my tone conversational. Because that was your voice, Eleanor. Your words, your confession of a 4-year affair with your own son that resulted in a child. I turned back to the congregation, many of whom were now standing, some heading for the exits, others too shocked to move. Maya Whitmore is 4 years old, I announced. She would have been conceived while Mark and I were already dating, while Eleanor was planning our engagement party and telling me how lucky I was to be welcomed into their family. Mark finally found his voice, though it came out as a broken whisper. Sofia, please, let me explain. Explain what? I cut him off. Explain how you've been sleeping with your mother for years. Explain how you have a daughter with the woman who gave birth to you. Explain how you were planning to marry me while maintaining this sick relationship. The chapel was in chaos now. My family was standing in shocked solidarity, my father's face dark with rage. Mark's side of the family was fragmenting, some fleeing in horror, others demanding answers. The society photographers who had been hired to capture our perfect day were frantically snapping pictures of the most scandalous wedding implosion in recent memory. I picked up my bouquet, the innocent white roses that had hidden the device of their destruction, and let it fall to the altar steps. The sound of it hitting the stone was surprisingly loud in the chaos. I want to thank you all for coming today, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. You came to witness a wedding, and instead you've witnessed the truth. Sometimes that's more valuable. I looked at Eleanor one final time. She was clutching the back of the pew, her perfect composure completely shattered. You were right about one thing, Eleanor. I am a mistake, your mistake. You underestimated me. Then I looked at Mark, this man I had loved, this stranger I had never really known. I hope Maya grows up to be nothing like either of you. Without another word, I turned and walked down the aisle, not as a bride, but as a woman who had just liberated herself from the most toxic family imaginable. My mantilla veil trailed behind me like a victory banner, the Spanish lace catching the afternoon light streaming through the stained glass windows. The heavy chapel doors opened before me, and I stepped out into the bright, clean sunlight. Behind me, I could hear the continued chaos, shouting, crying, the sound of a family, and a reputation imploding in real time. My parents caught up with me in the parking lot, my father's arms immediately wrapping around me in a protective embrace. Mija, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, I'm so proud of you. Are you okay? My mother asked, her hands smoothing my veil with the same gentle care she'd shown when I was a child with scraped knees. I looked back at the chapel, where guests were still streaming out, some in shock, others in disgust, all of them witnesses to the truth that had been hidden for too long. I'm more than okay, I said, meaning it completely. I'm free. The annulment was surprisingly straightforward. When your fiancé has been engaged in an incestuous relationship with his mother, even the Catholic Church agrees that the marriage contract is invalid. The scandal made headlines in the society pages for weeks, effectively ending Eleanor's reign as a social queen and destroying any political ambitions Mark might have harbored. I kept my maiden name, of course. Sofia Martinez had always been strong enough to stand on her own. The restaurant my family owned saw a surprising uptick in business. Apparently, being the family that exposed the Whitmore scandal had made us local celebrities of sorts. People wanted to meet the woman who had turned her wedding into a courtroom and walked away with her dignity intact. Maya, according to the court documents that became public record, was placed in protective custody while social services sorted out the mess. The investigation revealed that Eleanor had been receiving substantial child support payments through a complex legal arrangement that kept Mark's paternity hidden. I hoped Maya would find a loving family, one that would give her the normal childhood she deserved, far away from the toxic web that had ensnared her from birth. As for Mark and Eleanor, they disappeared from public life entirely. Rumor had it they'd moved somewhere out of state, though whether together or separately, no one seemed to know. I didn't care to find out. The legal proceedings had revealed the full scope of their deception: secret bank accounts, forged documents, and a pattern of manipulation that went back years. I never did get married, in the traditional sense. But I learned something more valuable than any wedding could have taught me: that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept less than you deserve, even when it means walking away from everything you thought you wanted. And every year on what would have been my anniversary, I wear my grandmother's mantilla veil and remember the day I chose truth over comfort, dignity over acceptance, and freedom over the prison of other people's lies. That's real love, the kind you give yourself when no one else will.
Sofia, thank you for your raw courage in sharing this. Your story highlights that true justice means unmasking hidden family horrors and prioritizing self-worth, even when it shatters illusions. It's a stark reminder that freedom often comes from facing uncomfortable truths head-on. I'm Eliza Quinn, and remember, here on Wedding Day Justice, veils off, justice on.